Welcome to Hauler Talk. This is part 2, I guess, for this week. If you haven't listened already, please listen to our long-form interview with new NASCAR Commissioner Steve Phelps. Really interesting conversation there. Really thank him for all his time. And this episode is what you're kind of used to, I guess. We're going to talk about the race weekend at Martinsville Speedway, specifically the Wild NASCAR Xfinity Series race. And I am NASCAR's Mike Forde, joined as always by Amanda Ellis. Amanda, how you doing again?
I am doing great, fresh off a trip to Martinsville Speedway.
And Nate Ryan, NASCAR.com reporter and NBCSports.com reporter. And this weekend, Associated Press reporter, Nate Ryan. Nate,
that's right, a man of many words and outlets. Good afternoon to both of you. Sorry that I'm no longer in the same room with you, but it's great to be here.
Well, we can see you, so that's really all that matters. And then we have a special guest, another special guest this week, and that is the NASCAR Xfinity Series Managing Director, Eric Peterson. Eric, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so let's get right to it. The NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and this is why we have Eric in the room right now. Obviously, it was, I don't know, depending on how you want to describe it, action-packed, maybe a little messy, a little too aggressive, maybe a little bit over the line. And if you say that is over the line or egregious, as I think Sammy Smith himself admitted his move at the end of the race to the 54 car of Taylor Gray, we agree. And as you have seen, we just released the penalties for the race weekend, and there are penalties to the number 8 car of Sammy Smith, and that is 50-point penalty and a $25,000 fine. So I want to take you into the room a little bit on those decision-making, and that's why we have Eric here. So Eric, you've been thinking about this, talking to all the pertinent parties, discussing with your colleagues, whether that is Elton Sawyer, John Probst, Brad Moran, the Cup Series director, Seth Kramlich, the Truck Series director, and have landed on this penalty. So maybe take us through some of that decision-making and how you came to this decision.
Yeah, obviously, we want to see really hard racing and door-to-door racing, and contact is certainly is a part of the sport, and for sure part of the sport at Martinsville Speedway. But obviously we felt like after looking at all the facts and all the video and the team audio and SMT data and all the tools we kind of have to work with and review an incident like that what unfortunately what Sammy did was over the line and something that we feel like we had to react to. Definitely something we would prefer to leave in the driver's hands, but in this case, it wasn't really a racing move, and we reacted to it as such.
So, as we said, we have midweek penalties, and we often have those penalties, and something that we've discussed on this podcast for the last couple weeks and months, and something has been discussed in other podcasts amongst fans, even during the broadcast on Sunday afternoon on Fox, is, when do you decide to wait and collect all the facts versus to wave the black flag or show the 8 the black flag and put them on last car in the lead lap or worse? So what is NASCAR's philosophy in that? Or really, what is your philosophy in this particular case, specifically speaking about the 8? Why not give him the black flag versus waiting until midweek to give him this penalty?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Mike. I mean, certainly we do have in-race penalties at our disposal that we can use. Certainly would be a little bit easier to do that if it was somewhere in the middle of the race or earlier part of the race. Coming down to the last corner of the race, it makes it a little bit tougher. Obviously, we have a little bit of time we could do that, but we do nowadays we do have a lot of tools at our disposal. Between obviously in the tower, we'd have some camera angles we can look at, but waiting allows us the time to look at driver team audio, look at SMT data. And driver interviews, that kind of thing, to kind of put the whole piece of the puzzle together before making this decision. And obviously, I think the most important thing is that we get the decision right instead of having the decision right now. And with it being at the the end of the race, particularly if let's say, in particular, the 8 went on to win the race, the implications on that are pretty large. So if it's something we did in the race and ended up coming back and some information came to light that maybe there was an issue with a car or something to that effect, it'd be very difficult for us to kind of unwind that decision. So wanting to get all the parties involved and make sure we get it right is the main motivator in how we did that.
Yeah, I think that's just an important point to even hammer home. I think that's the nightmare scenario. There is, we talk about, local short track versus the national series, and that was a conversation, that was going on throughout the week. And it's probably easy to make that comparison, but the stakes are extremely high on the national series level. There's way more money, way more prestige. This is the sponsorships at a whole other level. And so that nightmare scenario is kind of where we got to look at and really guard against. So, I think the example of a scenario that could happen if we took that car back or, post-race tech, that brake pedal went all the way to the floor and the brakes just went out, and that's why that happened. And we, DQ'd that or black flagged that car and took the win away. There's no coming back from that. So in this instance, I think we did. That's where the decision was made. We looked at it and said, hey, let's get the facts first here. I think there will be scenarios in the future where we do use the black flag, but erred on the side of caution on that one. And so there has been a lot of discussion on that. So hopefully that clears it up for the fans out there and some of the other pundits who have brought up the same topic, which again, like you said, Eric, that's a fair question. And I think that's one that fans want to know about. And hopefully, that's kind of one of the reasons we started this podcast is to answer those questions where, in the past there was no Holler Talk, NASCAR's hottest new podcast, but now NASCAR's hottest new podcast exists, and that's what we can talk about. We can give you those reasons.
Hey, Forde?
Yeah.
Can I push back a little bit on the black flag then and play the role of the fan or Denny Hamlin?
That's why you're here, buddy.
Denny Hamlin said after his win at Martinsville Sunday that we have a black flag for a reason. We should start using it. So you just said, and I think explained the reasoning well, why it wasn't used necessarily in this instance. But is there an instance where it would be used? This is for you or for Eric, I guess, where it would be used in a situation like this, or in the future, would you be more likely to use a black flag when a competitor, goes 3 car lengths deeper to take somebody out like that? How do you answer Denny Hamlin fans, others who have been out there saying, when does NASCAR sort of step in immediately in the moment rather than waiting until Tuesday?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question for sure. We have in-race penalties. We could hold a car a lap or 2 laps or at the end of the race potentially put them to the tail end of the lead lap or something like that. We have used some of those holding for a lap or 2 in different situations previously. I think that's something, internally we continue to talk about and look towards, being able to do that more in the future if the circumstance is obvious and really clear. I think just like we talked about before, though, that the high stakes decisions, especially at the end of the race, we just need to make sure that we have all the facts before we pull the trigger on that decision so that we ensure that we're making the right decision.
Yeah, and I think to answer your question, it's a hypothetical, so I always hate answering hypotheticals, but the one that we keep going back to, and we've talked about, is what happened at Martinsville in the fall last year. You saw the 3 and the 1 car kind of act as a moving chicane for the 24, and I don't know if you use the right analogy there, but police escort, as I said last week, kind of protecting them, not passing him. That was one where I think we looked back and probably said, hey, if you see something, say something. And that was probably one where, if we were in that same situation, we'd probably cut that out, tell them to cut that out sooner than we did back in 2024. So I think that's probably one answer. But as far as, I think Eric answered it, so I belabor that point, but I think it's such a high, like I said, it's just a high stakes situation where we need to feel very, very confident that some shenanigans were at play before we use the black flag. But that's not to say that we won't ever use it.
Well, we
Right,
did
understandable.
use,
And I understand all that, but on the facts side of it, as you're collecting facts, I get that. Does Sammy Smith pretty much admitting he did it on purpose, does that make this an easier call, an easier decision?
Well, yeah, I can answer unless, and Eric can add to it. But I yes, to answer your question, yes, I think it played into it for sure. You've seen other instances of this. Bubba Wallace with your colleague Dustin Long a few years ago. I think you look at Denny Hamlin with Ross Chastain a couple years ago. We didn't need him to say what he said for this to happen. I think this would have resulted in a penalty anyway. But him confirming what we believed and then what the data showed, I think we had a waterproof case here in this instance.
Well, and I was just gonna, bring up like we did hold a driver, I think 2 laps last year in a truck race.
Yep.
So it was at Nashville. So I think it was Lane Riggs, if my memory serves me correctly. So like we have used the option in a race recently. But I will also say, just for context, I don't want someone to misinterpret this as like, us being defensive to that question, because I agree it's a great question. I will just add in context, and Eric can add to this too, that in context of that last lap incident, the first immediate thing we do is worry about all the vehicles that are now spread out over the start-finish line and getting medical to them. We moved 3 or 4 vehicles, I think, easily trying to get... So at Martinsville, we try not to move an ambulance because it's
Super tight.
super tight. We try to use chase trucks to get drivers to and from the care center. Not only do we use chase trucks, we had to use an ambulance. That's how many drivers we had
Yeah.
available that needed to be picked up. So I think, again, I'm not sharing that for someone to misinterpret that as an excuse. I'm just sharing it for added context that there were a lot of drivers who needed to be attended to immediately following that event. And then also the cleanup that was required to go through that. Now, in those same moments, as we're trying to get safety trucks and ambulances and drivers to the care center, Eric and Elton are working swiftly to pull the replay, and we're looking at that, at the same time. Sometimes I feel like when people can, sometimes talk around maybe what their opinions are, if you're not in the room, you don't realize how busy that space is in that moment, while Eric's also trying to get cars to pit road, because now we have to capture the field safely, get them to pit road, be able to start the tech process, there's interviews for TV, all the things. And then at Martinsville, the victory lane is actually on the front stretch. So we couldn't even bring out victory lane until we safely had captured all the drivers that needed to be transported and then moved the vehicles. So it's just, I feel like a lot of times just in post-race scenarios, this one is unique because it happened on the last lap, is people just kind of can imply that we're not doing anything up there. But the reality is it's actually a very busy situation. And Eric can kind of add to like what kick-started once that happened, what the next, I don't know. We were busy. Eric and I talked often throughout the weekend, so like I don't want to imply that like, the race was over and we don't think about it for, 3 days. That's not the case at all.
Yep.
There's a lot of moving parts.
No, I think you covered it really well. I mean, there's a lot going on at the end of the race. In addition to that, with ending under caution, our timing and scoring group is trying to figure out the finishing order and where everyone finished, and with cars crashed on the front straightaway, we're certainly tending to the drivers that are in that incident, and trying to get the cars captured and start the post-race inspection process. So there's a lot going on. Again, not an excuse of why we can't necessarily do something directly after the race, but again, with the implications of those decisions, the importance is to get that right, and not just do it as quickly as possible.
So that is the penalty to the 8 car. There are 2 other NASCAR Xfinity Series penalties that you may have heard or seen, and that is a $5,000 fine each to Jeb Burton and Taylor Gray. So a little background context to those 2 penalties. Both Taylor and Jeb were in the care center post-race, and there was some behavior that we felt stepped over the line as far as interrupting what is a really medical situation. The care center is almost an on-site hospital. So you really need to, what we want to express to the drivers and any competitor that enters that area, there should be a sense of decorum there. We need to understand that doctors, nurses are tending to and giving care to other competitors, fans potentially, and concentration is kind of important there, obviously. So to enter the care center, whether you're told to go there or just choose to go there on your own to confront a fellow competitor because you're unhappy with what happened in the race, just really something we need to avoid. So there were 2 penalties handed out for that infraction. Really just a message to the garage and to those 2 individuals that, we get it. Emotions, we love the emotions. Emotions in the sport is what made it so popular for the last 77 years, and we don't want to tamp those down, but there's a time and a place, and the place certainly is not the infield care center. So moving on, really from the penalties itself, I want to, what's the next step? And also take a look back with Eric. So next step, Darlington Raceway. I know you have some plans for the drivers, Eric. What are those plans? What are you hoping to accomplish as we move forward here?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So our plans are before we run the event at Darlington is to have a meeting with all the Xfinity Series drivers, just drivers only. We had one of these meetings at Daytona prior to the season starting. Feel like it went pretty well. We've had 6 really good races to start off the Xfinity Series season in 2025, and unfortunately, Martinsville, was our 7th and didn't go quite as good. And some of that obviously is a product of the short track that is Martinsville Speedway and the beating and banging that kind of goes on there. But there were some other things in the race besides the 8 and the 54 that were certainly pushing the boundaries of clean, good hard racing. And we just kind of want to address the entire field. And we set a record for caution laps for an Xfinity race, at least in the last, I think, 18 or 20 years. And outside of the first 53 laps and one 20-lap run after that, the rest of those 14 cautions that we came across, I think the longest green flag run we had was 8 laps. So that's obviously not what we're looking for. So we're certainly going to kind of talk to the drivers and address that and obviously get their feedback on how they feel it went and what we can do going forward to make that better and get back to the kind of good, hard, clean racing the Xfinity Series is known for.
Yeah, when you rattled those stats in a meeting this morning, I was flabbergasted. I knew it was stop and start and stop and go throughout, but the longest, besides that 120-lap run you mentioned, was 8 laps. That was wild. So, I wish I can remember who tweeted it or posted it on X. I thought it was a really interesting comment. Was, I don't know. The tweet was something like, something happened in the truck series that a switch was flipped, and now they are racing clean. And they were referencing, but going back to the season finale in 2023 at Phoenix, the championship, which was super sloppy. And what happened there is, and this is mostly public knowledge, but maybe not talked about a whole lot, was we did exactly what Eric is doing this weekend. Seth Kramlich, the managing director of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, called an all-drivers meeting and really just said, what happened at Phoenix embarrassed the sport. And we are better than that. And you guys are better than that. And we gotta fix this because we're a family in this garage, and we don't want our family to be looked at as a bunch of amateurs, which we are not. So once that happened, it did feel like it got cleaned up a little bit. And I'm not saying I don't want to overreact to one NASCAR Xfinity Series race, because I think for the most part, fans, media alike feel like on most days, not most days, but on many days, this is the best racing in all of NASCAR. And I know your predecessor, Wayne Aughton, was not afraid to say that the best racing was in the Xfinity Series. And I'm sure you, Eric, are also in agreement of that.
Oh, for sure. I mean, Wayne would say that on a weekly, if not daily basis, for sure. So, and I agree with that as well. I mean, we have really good racing, and it's a great series to feed into the Cup Series, and feel like we put on a really good show with good, hard, clean racing every week, other than a few exceptions, and certainly Martinsville was one of those exceptions, unfortunately.
So, Eric, last one on this particular topic, unless anyone else has anything, of course. Don't want to hog the mic here, per usual. You're coming from, so this kind of segues into your background a little bit too. You're coming from, you never came from RFK, right? It was always Roush when you were there?
Yeah, when I was there, it was Roush Fenway Racing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Roush Fenway Racing, and Jack Roush's name has been invoked a few times from pundits this week of, hey, Dale Earnhardt Jr. needs to take a page out of Jack Roush's playbook and make Sammy rebuild a car, fix a car, or get in the shop and get his hands dirty, because that will teach him. That will show him that, hey, like, you just can't do this without any accountability and feel like you get to take the week off and we'll see you at Darlington and we'll do it again. Do you have any? What was your experience with that? Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I feel like was famously taken out of the car and made to do that. That's not a wives' tale, right? That's something that actually happened at Roush Fenway.
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, definitely. I had the pleasure working at Roush Fenway for Jack Roush for 12 years and managed the Xfinity program there, and our kind of was in charge of driver development while I was there. And yeah, that I would say we ran a lot of drivers through there and developed a lot of good drivers that a lot of them are still in the Cup Series now today. And yeah, I would say one time or another, almost every single one we had while I was there spent some time in the chassis shop or body hanging shop. That was definitely a frequent thing that Jack did when they wrecked too many cars, and in Ricky's case, actually even sat out a race once. So Jack, that was something. Driver development was certainly a core of Jack's and of that company, and he took it very seriously and definitely did a really good job of managing the drivers as they came up and helped form most of them into the drivers they are today, for sure. Definitely had an impression on them, for sure.
Yeah, that's a great story. Certainly to hear about a two-time Xfinity champion who had to be taken out of the seat to learn how to fix cars, that he was making his crew members' life more difficult. Eric, I have a couple that this might be for Forde to answer as much as you, but just one more thing on Smith. I'm struck by the fact that 50 points and $50,000 is the same as the Austin Cindric penalty, I believe, which I know is Cup versus Xfinity, but there was some discussion after the Cindric penalty of would he be sat out a race. I know that the circumstances are completely different here, but was there any thought given to sitting out Sammy Smith for a race? And if not, like, is this penalty now somewhat of not a substitute, but is it considered a way to punish drivers without necessarily suspending them for a race?
Well, I think you touched on kind of the tools we have in our toolbox, and one we talked about previously here is in-race penalties. The others are financial points, and then obviously a suspension. So we and obviously doing nothing is one of the options too. So we discussed all of those options and kind of just looked at what we had done in the past for other situations. And unfortunately, not one situation is identical, 100% identical to the same. So there's different circumstances that surround each one of those, and kind of where we landed on this particular one was that that points and money were where we were going to land on the appropriate reaction to what happened with Sammy at Martinsville. And it was 25,050 points. So the points were the same as the Cindric issue at Coda, but financially it was less. Primarily, just the difference in the finances between the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series.
Got it. I appreciate that answer and appreciate the correction as well. The last one I have, and again, this might be more for Forde, but obviously Sammy Smith's team wasn't entirely happy about what transpired in this instance, and there was some discussion about would the team perhaps punish Sammy Smith. There was some speculation that might be possible. Does NASCAR have a position on that? Like, if a team were to take action against a driver for what he did on the racetrack, does that remove NASCAR from the process? Would you still be involved? Like, how would NASCAR view that?
So, yeah, I think Eric should probably put the bow on it. But my thought, and from what I've heard throughout the day on this one, is how they handle their business behind closed doors. I think is their business. We're not going to get involved in that world. And if they chose to suspend Sammy Smith, then that's fine. If they don't, that's fine with us as well. We raise our hands to do the job that we have to lay down, to govern the sport and lay penalties down if we need to, and we did that, obviously. But I would say, sort of veering off your answer a little bit, is we do expect owners to be part of the solution. Whether this penalty fixes the problem or curbs it, I don't think it's going to completely fix it. I don't think any penalty would fix it. But I think I saw a clip from Denny's podcast where he said, you really what NASCAR needs to do is issue a penalty so that when the next time this happens, the driver will think twice, or at least put some pause into their actions of saying, if I do this, it's going to be bad from a public perception standpoint, and also hit me in the wallet and hit me in the points wallet. But then spinning forward to your question, Nate, of the owner's role in this, I think there are going to be some conversations over the weekend that it will involve the team principals here and saying, hey, listen, this is also on you to help fix this problem. And it's really the entire garage. I think NASCAR plays a role in trying to fix this. The drivers need to self-police. Spotters need to be involved. Crew chiefs need to be involved, and team principals and owners need to be involved. And I think everyone needs to understand that this is just not on NASCAR to fix this problem. Everyone needs to step up and understand that these actions shouldn't be tolerated, and if it happens again, then you're going to be battered around from all directions.
Well, Keselowski tweeted that.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a former champion in the series. He is a current Cup driver, also has an ownership, stake in RFK. So, he waited a couple days to post his, comments, and then, he did post them yesterday where, he basically said exactly what you said. And I think the thing with Keselowski's kind of take is interesting because he has been a guy who has had a few rough and tumbles behind the wheel when it comes to navigating the Xfinity Series during his career, and maybe to a degree in the Cup Series at times. But, it's, as a former champion, I think, his take was interesting to read yesterday.
Totally.
From that perspective.
Do you have anything to add, Eric?
I think you guys covered it really well. I mean, just like we were talking about before with, my previous experience at Roush Fenway and the way Jack Roush went about handling development drivers and drivers in his stable. I mean, the team certainly has a role in it. NASCAR does as well, which is obviously why we're, participating in trying to get some correction out of the incident that happened at Martinsville. But certainly the team is part of the solution as well.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Eric, before we kind of tie a bow on this one, but there's been so much, it felt like a lot of people had thoughts and opinions on this one over the last couple of days, and whether it was Saturday night when people were posting their thoughts, or to Ford's point, a couple of the podcasts have obviously discussed it, just like we are. On the meeting, the all driver meeting that you have this weekend, do you plan to invite any former drivers or, champions or anyone from that perspective to join that meeting, or will that meeting be essentially, something that you conduct from your end?
Yeah, I think we're still working on the details on that. I mean, I think we certainly could go either way on that. I mean, we certainly would welcome some experienced driver input to kind of help talk to our group, but we also have some of that in the Xfinity Series too. So, we'll certainly address the group and it kind of be an open forum discussion, and would like to hear obviously their version of how they feel that the event went and how they want to race going forward, and kind of have an open dialogue on that for sure.
Okay, so that is the mop-up duty that we just did on the on Saturday's event, and appreciate Eric joining us to talk about it. But I want to let fans get to know Eric a little bit. Awesome dude, super helpful. I think he's going to be outstanding in this role. So now you're how many races in? 5?
This will be 7.
Okay, so this will be 7. So we just finished our 6th.
No, just finished 7. Sorry,
just finished 7.
Yeah.
Man, we are 7 races in already.
It's flying by.
Gravy. What is it? Is it what you thought? What you expected? Any surprises? How's it going?
I mean, I think overall it's gone pretty smooth and pretty much as I expected. As you guys know, I spent the last 6 years as the technical director of the Xfinity Series, working with Wayne Auten, who was obviously the managing director for a long time, and had a lot of experience. So I learned a lot about this side of the sport from Wayne. I've been on the competition side, team side. Started as race car driver, like a lot of people in this sport, and transitioned into crew chief on late models, and then was on team management side at Roush Fenway before coming to NASCAR. So certainly it's been a long time, almost 30 years on the competition side, and the NASCAR side is a little bit different. So definitely was really good to have Wayne to learn from and kind of learn this side of the sport. But overall, I think the first 6 races actually went surprisingly smooth. It was pretty much what I expected, and unfortunately, race number 7, it started to unravel a little bit, and the job got a little harder. So, but that's part of the deal.
And then you got called into service to be on Hauler Talk, which is the worst part of your week. And you're a racer. You were a driver. You've been in the sport. I mean, when did you start racing? Early age?
1992. So I was 13, I think, when I started. So race go-karts, Legends cars, super late models, kind of similar path to a lot of people who are in the sport, and then moved on to, like I said, crew chiefing, and then moved to North Carolina to come work at Roush Fenway, and kind of had a team manager career there before coming to NASCAR.
And you're from Wisconsin, right?
I'm from Rockford, Illinois. Actually,
Illinois.
Technically McChesney Park, Illinois, northern suburb of Rockford.
So you're part of that Rockford Mafia then?
Well, not exactly.
I was thinking the same thing. It's
little different time frame. They were all gone and down here, and kind of gone from here before I got in the sport pretty much. But
you got that Midwestern personality of just cool, calm, collected. You're the second person sitting in that seat today. We had Steve Phelps there earlier. Kind of the same frame of mind. I haven't seen you get rattled at all. So is that Midwestern personality? Have you gotten mad yet? I know you called one driver to the hauler so far, and I hear you handle it very well. How'd that go?
So far, I don't think I did have. The one time Wayne was out for a race a few years ago, we did have an issue. Unfortunately, I had to handle something in his place, and
no, Chris Wright, didn't you?
Oh yeah, we did. Yeah, we did have to talk to Chris a little bit. That's true. So yeah, there was nothing got out of control there. Tried to keep it cool and even keel, pretty much is how I try to handle things. But yeah, so we haven't had any major blow ups yet. So that's been good.
But he got to witness Wayne, I'm sure, for several years.
Oh yeah,
and
Wayne.
Take notes.
I got to learn from Wayne a little bit. So yeah, I got to see how he handles things, and like I said, a few years ago, I might have been the first or second year I worked here. I had to do one in his place, and that one actually didn't go quite as well. So that one got a little exciting. So it can happen. So.
Well, I think I feel like you and Wayne have different personalities, but also you command the same respect from the garage, and so it's exciting to have you in the sport. And when they announced your promotion early last year, I was really excited because I think it's always. First of all, you understand our side of the aisle, of the comm side, and you're always forthcoming with information and understand where we're coming from, because I'm sure when we question you about things, you could be like, God, leave me alone. I'm trying to work here. But you don't. Thank you for not doing that. But really appreciate your time today, Eric, and love the job you're doing, and wish you the best the rest of the year. And hopefully we'll have you back under a little bit more fun circumstances where you're not talking about a penalty.
That sounds like a good plan.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you to Eric Peterson, who helped us understand the Xfinity Series penalties that happened this week. And I mentioned the Rockford Mafia, by the way, which without any context. So if you don't know the Rockford Mafia, it's just kind of a jokey term for, really, prior to Eric, just two people. John Darby, who is the former NASCAR Cup Series managing director forever ago, and of course, NASCAR Hall of Famer Chad Knaus, also from Rockford, and now Eric Peterson from Rockford. So pretty wild that town in Illinois has produced so many NASCAR brethren.
Yeah, and I did want to say, I didn't want to necessarily say this when he was here, just because I kind of know Eric's personality, as you do too, but Eric had big shoes to fill in the Xfinity Series. Wayne had been there for many, many years, was very loved by the series, and Eric had been in there too. Like, that's the thing that I think has worked out so well in this transition is Eric has been a part of that garage, for many, many years in the technical role that he served. But I did want to say this, that Eric's doing a great job. We have the opportunity to work with them very closely. I had a chance to work with him, pretty closely over the last few days. And, he's doing a great job. He takes what he does very seriously. He takes the representation of that series seriously and what people think of it and the drivers. And I am confident, when they have that meeting later this week, that message will be delivered. And I truly believe that those drivers will listen and take that, take that well, just like the Truck Series drivers did. It's proven that sometimes those meetings need to happen, and I don't know, I think a lot of times it's like, when you have kids, every once in a while you got to remind them who's in charge.
Yeah, I think the Truck Series drivers, from anecdotally, did appreciate it. They were said, there are a few of them that went to Seth and said, hey, appreciate you doing that, because that's exactly what we needed to hear. So, to your point.
And there are times where, I don't want to mention names, but there are times when you will have a penalty that goes out, whether it be the Truck Series or the Xfinity Series, and someone on that team will call and say, thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes family members have called and said thank you for doing that. Owners have called before and said, I don't know what you plan to do, but I'll be supportive of it. I appreciate you doing something. So I think, a lot of times when, though the penalty process is never a fun one, we prefer not to have to go through it. A lot of times on the back end, and obviously this isn't information that's really reported, but you will have people who will stop and say, thank you for being willing to do that. It'll make a difference. So that's what I think happened in the Truck Series, and that's what I think will happen in the Xfinity Series as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I think, like I said, the Xfinity Series is usually pretty clean, so I think that was a bit of an anomaly. So hopefully it does get cleaned up, and obviously a big part of this is that the race that sets the championship for is also at Martinsville. So we got to nip that in the bud and really make sure that doesn't sour the second time in 2025 that we visit Martinsville Speedway, because that is it's a big one. So now we will take a couple fan question. We got one here from my man Alex Strickland. Alex is a loyal listener to Hauler Talk. Always hits me up on X. So appreciate that, Alex. And this one, he says, the 43 team passed pre-race inspection, which includes weight, but obviously something changed throughout the race for them to fail post-race. I look forward to hearing a great explanation and learning more about this on Hauler Talk. So thanks for bringing that up, Alex. That was maybe the other big officiating / inspection topic, competition topic from the race weekend. The 43 did fail post-race inspection following Sunday's Cup Series race. And so a couple notes to talk about with the 43. So the 43 didn't finish in the top 5. But as luck or bad luck would have it, I guess, if you're the 43, they were picked as the random cars to come home to the R&D Center in Concord, North Carolina, to be torn down as part of the post-race inspection process. So it was going to be the 43 and the 10. So when you are the random car, you are also subject to at-track post-race inspection, which is really the optical scan station, the underbody scan, and then weights. So the 43 was brought up to the weight platform and came in too light. And so what happens when they come in too light? Bring them back down off the weight platform, let them fill up their water and top off there. Same with the fuel as well and oil. Really add all their fluids just to anything that got burnt off during the race. We'll let them top it off and bring it back. And sometimes that does get them to the weight that they need to be. That was not the case with the 43. So as far as what happened between pre-race inspection and post-race inspection and why that changed, we did look at the car. There was some damage, as you will see in Martinsville races, every single race. Almost every single car is going to have some damage to it. So we did look at that to see if there was any damage that a part came off the car that would have caused them to have a weight issue to make them come too low there. That wasn't the case in the 43. All the parts were still in place, and really what happens is there is a tolerance between pre-race and post-race. So you're allowed a certain amount of pounds post-race, and that is really just the wear and tear and things like that. And they still came in too low. So really probably what happened there is that they just pushed it too far too far up against that line. They did put out a statement that pretty much said that they looked at it and they just, they pushed too hard. And that's what teams in the NASCAR Cup Series do. That's their job. So we don't get too upset about that because we understand that this is the most competitive stock car series in the world, and that's what the teams are paid to do, is go right up against the line without going over. And the 43 car, unfortunately, did go over there. So that is the story of the 43 car.
All right, we had another question from Johnny. Johnny, thanks for your question. His question was just, how often does NASCAR look or listen to media for reactions and feedback? How often would you say this helps them make decisions or changes to the sport? Do they listen to podcasts or Sirius XM? Do they look at Jeff Gluck's Good Race poll? And he went on to say some nice things in general about the sport and the people in the sport. Says he understands not 2 weeks are the same. Things are always changing. And just kind of wanted to know how much we lean into, maybe what is often said. So you made a joke back that we would discuss this on the pod, but then you told him that we never listened to Jeff Gluck. So shout out, Jeff. I know you're listening. But I would say that the The comms team definitely listens. I don't want to imply that others do not. I don't know if they do, to be honest.
Well, I think with Jeff Gluck's poll, take that one for instance. I think we pay attention to it. We look at it. Steve O'Donnell has admitted that regardless of. So let me say this. I don't want to make people think the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Steve O'Donnell and Mike Forde vote yes no matter what. It will 100% be yes, whether we agree with that topic or not. But also Steve O'Donnell and Mike Forde both know a bad race when they see one, and no one gets more upset about a bad race than Steve O'Donnell. I will say this. We both talked about that when he was in here for his interview in the inaugural episode of Hauler Talk. Very passionate about that. So I will say they do pay attention to that. But we also have the fan council. That's something that Steve Phelps mentioned in his interview, which I urge you to listen to. Once again, I'll keep plugging that until I'm out of breath. And so part of that is we have a fan excitement score, and our good friend Derek Thomas, who we, by the way, we need to have on.
We
will have him on.
Yeah.
And I know he will be listening to this because he has said that he gives himself a calendar invite on Thursday afternoon to remind himself to listen to Hauler Talk, which is very sweet. As good a guy as we have in this industry. So he works closely with the fan council data, and they give their feedback and give a score of 1 to 10 of how they felt about a race. And I will say, I think it's pretty close to that Jeff Gluck poll.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah. So when the I honestly do not know what, I haven't heard what the excitement score from Martinsville.
Just over 50%.
For Gluck or us? For fan
Gluck.
council.
For Gluck.
So it was just over 50. Fan council, I don't know if it was a 55.1. So I don't know what it was, but it's usually pretty close. And maybe Gluck's might be a little bit higher than the fan council often. I think usually the average is around 7.9 there, and Jeff Gluck's poll is often over 80. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I know we look at it as far as whether we other take media reactions and things like that.
Well, I think it depends I'm not sure exactly what I'm trying to think here, like if he was meaning just general races, was he meaning like
what we should do for penalties?
Yeah, we had Sammy Smith incident, like is NASCAR paying attention? So what I would say is it's our job in the comms department to know the pulse of the industry, the pulse of every, fans, the pulse of media. So we do spend a lot of time, maybe not so great for our mental health some weeks, but we do spend, a good part of our week listening as much as we can. Now, we have so many podcasts now and properties that from time to time, I'll be honest, you and I might tag team it. But for the most part, we do try to understand what the main players are saying. That said, though, I think, like for example, with, the Sammy Smith incident, we have to go back and kind of capture interviews and capture some things, that were said. We do that for incidents a lot, like looking at what drivers said in certain situations. And, so we might be kind of gathering some of that information. But, I do think our people make decisions based on the rules and based on their experiences in the tower and things like that. But it's we're more in line with, like, what's the pulse of the industry? What are the thoughts in the industry? Now, every weekend at the racetrack, they'll ask you, how's everybody in the media center? What the drivers say? Because I think they know if anything big comes of something, we're probably going to notify them. But most of the time, every week, if we're at the track, they're going to ask us, like, how everyone, and some of that's just genuine. That's who they are. Yeah. They're just curious, like, how everyone's doing. But
yeah, and I think if someone makes a good point, they'll take that into account, and Denny Hamlin has a podcast, if you hadn't heard, but he'll say whatever he says on the podcast, but oftentimes he'll say exactly what he says in the podcast and say it to Elton Sawyer.
He'll text or
I know for a fact that Denny texted Elton this week and to give him his opinion on what happened in the Xfinity Series race. So, which is great. And that's something that Amanda said from week one is that, like the hauler doors are not locked And they are welcome to come in whenever they want. They have cell phone numbers. They have, they know where the R&D center is. So we always encourage the drivers, if they have a question or a concern, to reach out. And as if you hadn't heard, we did an interview with Steve Phelps earlier today. It's a joke. Laugh.
How many times are you going to plug that interview? And it's all about the collaboration, and Steve talks a lot about the collaboration, and I think, and he also talked about the integrity of Elton Sawyer, and no one has more integrity in the sport than Elton, which I really appreciated, because Elton's one of my guys, and love that man to death. And he has. And if you work with Elton, you know that's a very true statement.
Yeah. He's the man. And if you approach a topic appropriately, and not combative or anything like that, Elton has all the time in the world for you. And I think, and Denny, this might come as a surprise, but considering how Denny can be a little bit flamboyant, Denny has a good relationship with Elton, and they've talked a number of times, and a lot of times as a media member. To go back to the question, and not as a driver. There was a time last year where, I think Elton said, like, "Are you talking to me as Denny Hamlin, driver of the 11, or Denny Hamlin, the host of Actions That Are Detrimental?" Because it's a little bit of it could be a different answer, because he always wants to be candid with them, but sometimes. Those comments aren't.
Denny's been known to take something you say and pop it on the old pod.
Yeah,
so,
which was taken completely out of context. But
I also think there's a point to, like, and this is kind of along that discussion, because people love to say that, like, we don't like what people say, or we try to turn them in, or that's actually not true, to be honest. Most of the time, what has always impressed me is, like, our officials listen to a lot of, they consume a lot of the media that is available. A lot of times they'll call us and say, like, "Hey, have you listened to this? Like, I don't think that's right, or can you help us clarify that?" Or, and then I will also say that, so kudos, shout out to all of them that I know listen to the podcast. But I also just think in general, like, how lucky we are, even though sometimes we may not agree with all the things, like, how lucky we are to have as many podcasts as we have. Like, when you talk about the Dale Jr. Download, and you talk about Actions Detrimental, and we often, like, you have, our friend Freddie on DBC that, we often, we'll sometimes text back and forth at times, but and we've been known to not always agree, but I just think that, like, it's really cool for our fan base to have as many opportunities to listen and consume our sport as they do. And I think, at least from the Dale Jr. side and the Denny side, that, like, it's, it's just not every sport has those type of people taking the time every week to show up and to, add to the conversation of the sport. So, to answer the question, I know, Johnny, I think we went a little bit off topic, but, we do our best to consume as much as we can, because we think it's part of our job. But like he said, OD's in tune in certain areas, and Phelps is in tune in other areas. And then, if we need to fill in the gaps, we do. But do we tell people what OD's favorite social avenue is?
Oh, TikTok?
TikTok.
Yeah. Who would have guessed? Yeah, I've gotten many TikToks from Steve O'Donnell saying, "Hey, this isn't right. You gotta talk to those guys."
I mean, I truly joined TikTok for that whole reason. I was not a TikTok fan, and then now I won't lie, I'm slightly addicted to TikTok. But no, Johnny, thanks for the question. We appreciate every week, seriously, to the fans that are sending us questions. I know there's one we didn't get to, so I will save that one for next week, and we'll make sure to add it to the stack. But as always, this week was full of, Steve Phelps interview. We had the penalties.
We talked to Steve today?
We talked to Steve today. So thank you to everyone listening. I know it's a little bit extra this week, but we appreciate it. As always, please rate and review the podcast. Please send questions on X. We love to feature them on the show, and we just really appreciate you guys showing up each week and spending time with us. So at that point, I think it's time for us to wrap and go back to the racetrack.
Yeah, listen to the Steve Phelps interview. Have a good one,
All right,
everybody.
guys. Thank you.